Here we go. And it will be available on the website once the webinar is over. We ask for you to keep yourself on mute just to minimize the amount of extra noise so everyone can hear us clearly. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. Lisa will be monitoring and will be letting us know when there are questions. And there will also be time at the end of the presentation for you to ask any questions. And if you have any technical, if you need any technical assistance, Lisa can also help you with those questions as well. Okay. So as you can see, this is your team that is doing the presentation for you today. We'll start with staff introductions, and I'll go first. My name is Ashley Marshall. I'm the program assistant for grants to organizations. I'm currently located in Pierce County, and I've been working with the agency for a little over 2 years now. Wow. And I'll go to Miguel next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Miguel Guillen. I am the Grants to Organizations Program Manager. I am coming to you from downtown Olympia, and I've been with Arts Walk coming up on 10 years now. Yeah, and I'll pass it over to Lisa. And we also have a representative here today from Shunpike who will introduce in just a sec.
I'm glad to be here. My name is Lisa Seward. I'm the program specialist for grants to organizations with Arts Walk, working remotely from Portland, Oregon, across the Columbia. And feel free to ask me any questions in the chat. And Joe, do you want to introduce yourself? Thanks.
Sure. Hi, I am Joe Mikesell. I am Program Director of Fiscal Sponsorship at Shunpike. I've been there for going on 4 years now, and I'm super excited to be here. Feel free to ping me directly if you have questions specifically about fiscal sponsorship, or you can also get my attention in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us, Joe. Okay, so for today's agenda, we'll start with some basic information about grants to organizations, and then we'll jump into an overview of our grant opportunity, the general operating support for emerging and small organizations. That's a mouthful, but we'll talk about that. And we'll also touch on the changes that we've made to our evaluation process. We'll share some tips on creating a strong application, and we will end our webinar with a submittable walkthrough. And I'll pause here. Does anyone have any early questions that they would like to ask us? Okay, I will continue. Okay, so there are about 6 or 7 different departments here at Artois, and grants to organizations is one of them. We do exactly what it says in our name. We do grants. We provide grants to organizations in the state of Washington through our 3 core grant programs: our Art Service Organization Support Grant, our General Operating Support Grants, and our Art Project Grant. We also propose new programs to the legislature, with the most recent addition to Artois being the Tribal Cultural Affairs Program, which I think has now been in operation for about a year or so now, which is really good and really exciting. So our focus, grants to organization focuses on 3 funding priorities in our grant programming: cultural equity, expanding the creative economy, and supporting arts appreciation, throughout our state and local communities. So for our grant overview of our general operating support for emerging and small organizations, it offers small grants to support young arts organizations. This grant helps cover day-to-day operating expenses so that young organizations can focus on providing creative experiences for their communities. Organizations that focus on the work of communities not fully or authentically represented in their region, especially those that focus on communities impacted by historical and structural inequity, are strongly encouraged to apply. An Artois defined emerging organization has at least 1 year of experience managing their organization and providing at least one public program. A small organization has at least 3 years of experience managing their organization and providing regular public programming. For our eligibility, this is a long list. I think I'm going too fast. Well, I'll give Joe the floor in terms of speaking about our partnership with Shunpike, but also to kind of cue it up. We are partnering with Shunpike this year in bringing our new groups wishing to apply to this grant that don't have 501c3 status, fiscal sponsorship through Shunpike. And groups that don't have 501c3 nonprofit status don't have to apply for fiscal sponsorship through Shunpike, but do need to find fiscal sponsorship before if they are awarded, they need to find 501c3 fiscal sponsorship. But I would like to pass it to Joe if you have anything to share.
So Shunpike's certainly not the only fiscal sponsor that you can choose to go with, but we are working directly with Artois for arts organizations to try to provide this opportunity. We are running a concurrent application at the same time, so you can apply on our website, but I would certainly encourage you to apply through the grant portal just to save yourself some time. Applying through us will just be an additional step on top of applying for the grant and applying for fiscal sponsorship at the same time. Thanks, Ashley.
Of course, thank you. If you are seeking fiscal sponsorship with Shunpike, please be sure to read through their applying for fiscal sponsorship document. You can find it on our guidelines on our webpage for the general operating support for emerging and small organizations. It has important information about fiscal sponsorship on it, and groups that apply for fiscal sponsorship must register for Shunpike's info session on Thursday, February 20th at 5 p.m. Additionally, if you are awarded, you will also have to attend a 90-minute onboarding session with Shunpike. Okay, so this is our eligibility, which seems to be pretty long, but I just want to go over this with everyone. To be eligible to apply to this grant, your organization must have 501c3 nonprofit status or be fiscally sponsored by a 501c3 nonprofit. You must have publicly accessible programming, be based in Washington State, a mission that centers arts, culture, and/or heritage. Emerging organizations are required to have at least 1 year of experience managing their organization and providing at least one public program. And small organizations are required to have at least 3 years of experience managing their organization and providing regular public programming. Organizations operating as affiliates of national organizations must be a part of group exemption. Miguel, do you have any context that you would like to provide around national organizations and group exemption?
Yeah, so some organizations in Washington State are affiliates or branches or of other more national or nationally based organizations. In order for us to fund you, you do have to have a separate. There's national organizations can apply for group status, and that means that all their branches within states are covered under their 501c3 status. We need to see that relationship between the branch and the main organization to fund you is basically what that means.
Thank you. Your organization must have an annual operating budget between 0 to 50,000 or 50,000 to $100,000. If you're an unincorporated group, not applying for fiscal sponsorship through Shunpike, I mean, as I just said before, but if you're not applying for fiscal sponsorship through Shunpike, you're eligible to apply, but will need to gain fiscal sponsorship before July 1st, 2025. Organizations that are ineligible to apply to this grant are individuals, for-profit organizations, religious organizations, government agencies, and departments, unless designated as a local arts agency, universities, colleges, academic departments, and K through 12 schools. For a more detailed list of what we can and cannot fund, we do have a list or a PDF attached to our guidelines and also on the general operating support for emerging and small organizations webpage on our agency website. So you can look through that as well. Okay, so here is our timeline. As you can see, the application opened Tuesday, January 21st. And it will close at 5 p.m. on Friday, February 28th. Please note the close time. Once the application is closed, we cannot open it back up if you've missed the deadline. Aside from today's webinar, we'll have another one 2 weeks from now, just in case anyone couldn't make it to this one and isn't able to watch the recording. For any lingering or general application questions, we will also have once a week our office hours starting Thursday, January 30th from 11 to 2 p.m. And the registration links for the next webinar and office hours, you can find those on our website as well. And Shunpike's info session, as previously mentioned, is on February 20th at 5 p.m. And you only need to register for the for this info session if you apply for fiscal sponsorship with Shunpike through our application. And notifications of application results will be sent the last week of May, but we will be in touch with applicants if the timeline changes at all. So,
Hey, Ashley, I think that's in the
yes,
last week of March.
last week
Well,
of March.
yeah.
Sorry, I meant May.
Yeah.
Excuse my typo.
No, you should have heard from us by the last week of May, but for this particular grant, we're looking to get notifications by the last week of March.
So required to apply. As you can see, there's a few things that you need. One being the IRS letter of determination. If you are a fiscally sponsored group, we will need your fiscal sponsor's IRS letter of determination, your unique entity identifier or your UEI number, which I believe has replaced the DUNS number that was assigned to organizations a few years ago. If you are fiscally sponsored, we will need your fiscal sponsor's UEI and your federal tax ID or your EIN number. And again, if you are fiscally sponsored, we will need your fiscal sponsor's EIN number, your statewide vendor number, or SWV number. And also, if you're fiscally sponsored, we'll need the SWV number for your fiscal sponsor. And just also want to make note with your statewide vendor number, if you've previously received payment from Washington State, we encourage you to check the status of your SWV number. Every 2 years, the Office of Financial Management removes inactive SWV numbers from their system. So you'll want to visit their website for more information. And Another number that you'll need for your application is the Washington State Unified Business Identifier, or your UBI number. When it comes to your UBI number, all organizations must be registered as a Washington State nonprofit or charity with the Secretary of the State. And you can find more information about your UBI number by visiting the Secretary of State website. We have an accessibility coordinator at Artswa. Her name is Alexis Sarah. Feel free to either talk to us about any access needs you might have in the grant application process, or reach out to Alexis by her email or her phone number, which are here. And we also have this listed on the grant guidelines as well. So a few frequently asked questions. Can organizations apply for multiple Artswa grants? Yes, you can apply for multiple grants from different departments, such as our arts and education, creative districts, or wellness, arts, and the military, but you cannot apply to multiple grants within grants to organizations. What happens after an application is submitted? That is a great question. All applications are screened for any incomplete information or errors, and it is then moved into our priority review process. After that review process is complete, we notify all of the applicants of their status and make our recommendations to our executive director and board of commissioners for approval. And I think this is the question that most people have. What are the chances of receiving a grant? This is another great question, and also a very important question. And in the essence of transparency, our funding hasn't, our funding has unfortunately not risen to meet the increase in applications we have year after year. There's about a 50% chance your organization will be funded, which is why it's very important to read through the guidelines thoroughly and make sure to take note of our tips for strong applications. I'll just pause here. Miguel, is there anything else that you would like to add in terms of chances of receiving a grant?
Yeah, this is a good place for me to jump in on a federal. We just got notification from the federal government literally hours ago that federal funding is frozen right now, and we don't know what that means. So my best input I can give right now is that what we've done at Artswa is prior to this notice is that Artswa, and we've tried to provide this information in all our documentation, is post-pandemic, our applicant pool has tripled, but our funding has not. And what we've done, try to arrange some priorities for funding to ensure that we are servicing, providing support to underserved communities, especially in rural areas. In terms of receiving a grant, we hope this improves that possibility for meeting our needs and our strategic plan around equitable funding. But in the past, generally, we can say that the chances of getting a grant are in the about 20% range. They're not high because we don't have a lot of money, and because we just have been receiving so many applications. But we are trying to do some things. But right now, with this federal funding freeze, we're still wrestling with what that means. We are assuming the federal funding freeze is not directed at the National Endowment for the Arts, which is the federal organization that funds our grants. But we are, as much as possible, letting folks know, since we just learned this a little bit ago, that we have received this mandate, and currently all federal funding is frozen, and we're hoping that that eases up in time for us to award and distribute grants as usual.
Miguel, I think this is also your slide as well. If you'd like to elaborate on the priorities and the change in our evaluation criteria. You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, there we go. So I just answered someone's question in a little relating to this a little bit in chat. So we are trying to prioritize grants in try and meet equitable distribution, and we were uh, well, we are going to be using these criteria. What these criteria or these priorities are is that when we go through the application pool, this information is going to pull out and it's going to help these organizations rise to the top a little bit. So we are foregoing panels this year. One of the things that we do have with panels is, especially when we're trying with limited funds, trying to meet good equitable outcomes, is that panelists can be kind of all over the place in terms of how that works, and we don't always meet our equity requirements. So this year we're going to forego panels and go primarily on priorities, and hopefully that will work a little better this year.
So as Miguel mentioned, we've changed our review process. As he said, we used to have grant panels, and this year we will not have grant panels. So this year, staff will review and score applications and make recommendations for funding to our executive director and board of commissions for approval. And it's right on this slide. The notification should be, well, like Miguel mentioned, you should hear from us probably before the end of the last week of May, but by the last week of May, you'll be notified of your status. Oops. So tips for a strong application. Avoid aspirational answers. Clarity is key. Make sure the description of your organization is clear. And we recommend you be as specific as you can. Tell us exactly what we need to know, and what you're saying, and overall understand what your organization is about. And be concise. The estimated length of time that we have to review is about 30 minutes for each application. So make sure to use the evaluation criteria as a guide while you're writing your answers. And remember to tell us about your organization and how it's set up for success and how it helps the community. So tips for work samples. They should reflect your organization in photos and or video. Make sure your work samples match what you're describing in your narrative. For example, if you specify that your organization serves multiple communities, it would be very helpful to us for that diversity to be reflected in the videos and photos that you submit for your work samples. We don't do much research outside of what's provided in your application. So links, and we recommend that links to your to a website or web pages should be kind of queued up to the page that you would like for us to review. And for video and or audio that you submit, just remember that this is sort of the cherry on top of your narrative questions, and choose media that speaks well to your organization and its programming. And next is Miguel with budget.
It's important on your work samples that they make sense to what it is that you're describing in your application. A lot of times, especially if you're in a panels process, this year we're not going to be using panels, but but I do know the applications in general are an audit tool, so that when we get audited by the NEA, all of that has to make sense. So your work samples are very important to be reflective of what you're letting us know via narrative. And when it comes to the budget, it's the same thing. We are looking, you describe your organization in a particular way, and you're saying you do these things, and so you're giving us this narrative what you do. We want to see that reflected in numbers as well. So the narrative is just your organization's operations in numbers. That's really the best that I can say about budgets. We can take a little bit more time as we go into the application and we actually look at the budget that we're asking you to fill. And I can pop in there again and just give you some information about what we're looking for, be of value for you to reflect in your budget. But when we get to that point in the application, we'll cover it again.
Realized I was talking and I was muted. But here is our submittable application. As you can see, all of the applicant information about your organization's information goes here at the top. And for all of the different specific legal statuses, so if you were to choose fiscally sponsored, you'll have different drop-down options for each legal status. But the general questions for the application, like the narrative questions, stay the same pretty much. And we have a question here about legislative districts, but you can use the district finder tool and choose from your district here. Yeah, I'll skip down to the narrative questions, which starts here. Miguel, did you want to jump in to kind of elaborate here on the budget?
Get off to the side because I have a screen over here, and over here I have my laptop, and it's very tiny, and I have old eyes. So this is the budget, and as you can see, we allow estimates. We want a general understanding of where your income is coming for the year, where your expenses are happening. So what's really important to us is just to know how your breakdown is in terms of outside of our SWAP funding, where is your funding coming? And can you scroll up just a bit to the no to on the actual budget form to the income side, and then one more, sorry, to the expenses side. So this is the part that's really pretty important to us. Again, we allow estimates, but we want a general understanding of what your organization spends in salaries, and you can just type that in. Don't put any other figures or letters or anything like that, because it'll mess up the formula in there. But here we're getting a general understanding of how it is that your organization is spending, what kinds of expenses it has. And we're looking for real general stuff. There are a couple of lines underneath where you can add information. So what we're trying to do is just get a very quick snapshot, especially for young organizations. We understand that things are always in flux for young organizations. You're growing, you're doing new things, you don't always know this, how to do stuff. So we're accepting estimates, but we want to get a general understanding that you understand compared to the narrative that you're describing to us, if this is all seems feasible. It's a very quick review for us on this, but we are used to looking at applications and what the expenses and income should be for the type of narrative that you're describing. So we get a very quick snapshot here of what it is that you're doing financially. And then in kind is really important. In kind, for those who don't know, it's just stuff that you get from folks, either volunteer labor, donated space, all these things. It's important for us, and especially around volunteer labor. One of the key things that happens with small and young organizations is often they're so used to being volunteer on so many levels that they aren't really tracking the full expense of what it is that it costs to do what you do. And this is where it becomes very important, where to match what it is that you do with your budget. This is one of the areas where it's really important, because if we see that you're totally a volunteer organization in terms of administration, and that's fine, but we also want to see that you understand that that's not free, that costs something, because it gives us a sense you have full understanding of what it takes for you not just to do what you are doing in the now, which is I ran a small arts organization for a dozen or so years, and I understand that initially so much is done volunteer that it's hard to track, it's hard to understand, and that's understandable. But when it comes to applying for funding, it becomes apparent to funders if you're not really understanding the longevity of what it's going to take for you. How are you really understanding it well enough to sustain you for continued support going forward? This is a really important place, especially for young organizations that tend to receive a lot of stuff in kind, or solicit free this or free that, which is something I used to do all the time. I used to try find free space and that kind of thing. But you do have to track in your budget for funders that you understand that it's a nice piece for them to see that you're fully understanding what it costs you to do what you do, and it's kind of lend some support to them supporting you, and then supporting you continuously. They can look forward with you because you're understanding, and it's clear to them that you're understanding, and they're understanding that you're understanding what it's going to take for you to continue doing what you do.
And spaces for you to add all of the budget information we're looking for, and also your last operating budget. And yeah, this is pretty much the application. Miguel, is there anything that I'm overlooking
We do have
to?
several questions in the chat. Maybe now would be a good time to field some of those.
Mhm.
And the first question is, what happens if our festival has two different districts representing our multiple venues? How would you fill it in?
Yeah, the district information is data that we're gathering to know where the organization is based, not necessarily where you're doing business. What we're trying to gather there is base information for future legislative funding. So if we fund an organization in District 42, we want to report on that. We're not necessarily reporting on where the activities happened.
Okay. And the next question is legal name on the applicant the person submitting the application or the name of the organization?
Yeah, when we talk about the legal name or the legal status of the organization, we're talking about how you're registered either with the state of Washington as a nonprofit, charitable organization, or how you're registered with the federal government for 501(c)(3) status. So it's the name of the organization.
Okay, one more question, and I hope these specific questions are helping everyone to fill this out. That's what we're here for. Here's the question. We took a year off from operating in 2024, except for staff, and resumed in 2025. Would you use 2024 as our last operating year or 2023?
Um, if if you took some time off, but the organization was still there, right? You kept up your licensing, you kept all that stuff, then you were actually still in operation. If you had a phone call, a meeting, what you did during that year is not necessarily important, especially in these times of recovering from pandemic and those kinds of things. We're pretty flexible around that. So as long as you didn't close your organization like legally through the state of Washington or with the federal government, we would consider you still in operation. I know with the group that I mentioned earlier, we did take time off occasionally just because we needed to, or and so it's fine as long as you haven't canceled the existence of your organization legally through the state or the federal government.
Okay, I'm gonna have two further questions, and then I also want to remind everyone that we have office hours on Thursday, and we're open there for your specific questions about your application. And just to save time, hopefully we can get to all of your questions, but if not, you're welcome to pop in on Thursday if you have a chance. So here's the next question. We have a team of volunteers who put in hours in exchange for admission. Should we add in their time hours into the in-kind section? So it's hours in exchange for admission. Should we base those hours on minimum wage and list the difference in their comp ticket and what it would cost to hire them? That's a
Yeah,
formula.
Yeah, that is complicated, but I do get it because, like I said, I ran that org and we did that kind of stuff too. So when it comes to applying for grants and trying to reflect what you are getting in to give that full picture to your funders, I would not necessarily be general. In kind is income and its expense. It should be on the top and on the bottom. So if you received if you have volunteer labor, that's an expense that's you're getting in kind, and you're offsetting that through some other means. I would I don't think it's necessary to drag all the information, to put all the information out there because the funders, it's just going to complicate your funders. For us, I would just say, if the offset is a portion of that, I would just give the dollar amount. How you do that is not so important. For other funders, I would ask them the question directly because they may be more interested in piecing out how it is that you offset that fund or that in-kind donation to your organization. But really, it's kind of getting in the weeds a little bit if you're offsetting a portion of it, and it's like, how necessary is that? For Artois, it is not that necessary. If you are getting in-kind labor at $5,000 and you're offsetting $4,000 of that, just go ahead and put that in and then just give us a note about it or just offset it completely or something like that. We just want to see that you're understanding more than anything the expense.
Okay, I'm going to set the other questions to the end of the presentation or again for our office hours, just to save a little time right now for those that want to log off. Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, thank you. And here is where you'll put the work samples. I did not mention in the part about in the presentation about work samples, but you can only submit between 3 and 5 work samples. And be very particular about the work samples that you submit, because if you were to upload like a PDF with some links or other photos on it and then also attach like 4 or 5 links here, that would be over 3 to 5 work samples. So we'll probably ask you to go back and choose which ones you would prefer to have. So just be very mindful when you go to submit your work samples and how many you're submitting as well. And I believe that's it, unless you are an unincorporated organization and you choose to apply for fiscal sponsorship through our application. Down here will be the information that you would have to fill out, which I can show that to everyone. For the Shun Pike application. So here at the end of the work samples, which would have been the end of the application originally, but you'll see here you just have a few questions to fill out, and the applying for fiscal sponsorship document is here, and Joe's contact information is there as well. And yeah, then you will pretty much be done. You can hit submit, or if you have any other things that you need to do and come back to the application, you can just hit save draft and you should be good to go. So I will go back to the presentation here. Oops.
I think we still have time for questions.
Yeah, I think we do too.
I think we run till 12:30, 12:45.
Yeah, 12:30. So we're pretty much at the end. This is just next steps. So yeah, gather your work samples, put together your budget. I know sometimes people have lots of line items, so just put that together. Gather all of the little different numbers and things you need for the application, like the UEI, SWV number, the EIN, the UBI, the all those numbers. And there are draft applications available on our website for this grant specifically. So if you would rather draft all of your answers in that and then copy paste, feel free to do that. And again, reach out to us if you have any questions or you need help with anything. We are always here and we are always happy to answer any of your questions and make time for everyone. And remember to submit your application by February 28th by 5 p.m. And with that, I will say we are finished.
We do have some
Okay.
questions. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to run through the questions that are in the chat, and then everyone can just open their own mic to their own questions with the remaining minutes. So the questions in the chat are, is that in-kind donated labor considered part of our annual operating budget? Is in-kind donated labor considered part of our annual operating budget, and in which case it might push them over the 50K level?
Yeah, we not really. What we're looking at, as you saw in the application, we've broken these out into 3 separate sections. And what guides a lot of our applications is audits, and we want to make sure that we've broken that out. In terms of this application, what we're looking at is your actual income, from grants and money that you've raised through donations, et cetera. That's what's really important to us. The in-kind section, as I mentioned earlier, is really for us to help us understand that you understand what it actually costs to do it. We're not going to, that should not push you over the limit. The actual money you bring in is really what your operating budget is, according to us.
Okay, and then quickly, 2 others. The application requires us to attach a budget for the last operating year with the projected budget and actual budget approved by the board. Is it a problem that we didn't have a projected budget last year?
So you ran the organization with just a standard budget. In other words, you drew up a budget, but you didn't. Usually that is an estimate of what it's going to cost you to do what you do. That's normally where the budget comes from. If In other words, if you submit a budget for last year and it doesn't separate out the expenses or the projection, I think that's fine. I think that's fine.
Simple one. Are there file size restrictions for uploading?
There are usually about, I think 5 meg is usually the standard top size. There shouldn't be any problem uploading files.
It's limited to 5 files. I think that's an important part of the restriction there. You can only upload 5 files. And then you can access this recording. It should be on our website. Is that right, Ashley?
Yes, it'll be on the website, and I will also send it out in my follow-up email that I'm going to send tomorrow.
And then feel free to unmute yourselves if anyone else has a further question. Thank you.
Yeah, and we do know that especially for younger organizations, you'll have questions come up, and we're all about making and helping young organizations grow. So anytime, as Ashley mentioned earlier, you want to, chat with us, we do have these webinars, and then we have office hours, but you can always reach out to us. Just send us a note. Do know that we're in grant season, and this is, of course, the busiest time. The closer we get to the deadline of the grant that you may be inquiring about, the harder it may be for us to actually get to your question in a timely manner if you're so close to the deadline. So try as much as you can. I know it doesn't always work that way, but try as much as you can to get your questions to us early so we can make sure we have enough time to meet with you. And we're happy to meet with you over Zoom. Sometimes face-to-face contact is really important. But we want you, I know you hear this a lot, but we really do want you to be successful. We're so thankful to Shunpike, who has made this possible. This partnership with Shunpike is really highly valued by us because it does. I do encourage you, if you're going to use Shunpike, La Sala used Shunpike for a long time, the group that I was talking about. It's very helpful when you're a organization. It's nice to have someone helping you do your paperwork and do all that stuff and take some of that, sort of pressure off so you can do your work. So I do encourage you, if you're going to apply to Shunpike, that you do it through the application. They've made it very easy. So yeah, if you have questions about fiscal sponsorship in general, you can talk to us or you can talk to Shunpike. And I know it can be confusing. It's like, what is it? How do I do this? And we're here to walk you through that process. And I do see a question: how long has this grant orgs been in existence? So we have been doing grants like this for maybe 40, 50 years. Quite a long time. This particular grant for emerging organizations is the primary difference. Our grants have always been sectioned out between small, medium, and large organizations. Emerging grant is new to us, uh, and that is really an effort for us to try and stimulate growth in Washington. Right, I don't see any other questions.
Yeah, well, we will give you 10 minutes of your day back. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you, Joe, for joining and having all of the answers for Shunpike and all the knowledge about fiscal sponsorship. And thank you to everyone for joining us. And again, I'll say it again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We are here and we are happy to help. And with that, I will stop the recording.